Joining us on Setting the Agenda today is Vibhuti. He is Managing Director of the Global Capital Services Group.
And also with us is Dr. Bharat Barai. He's the chairman of the Indian American Cultural Center in Chicago. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Thank you. And welcome to Setting the Agenda. In Bollywood, we say that there's a trailer and there's a movie. So we saw the trailer yesterday when the foreign ministers came face to face, and the Pakistani foreign minister refused to be present at the SAARC meeting until the Indian minister was there. And today, many say, will be the Friday blockbuster when the prime ministers take the stage. What should we be expecting?
I thought it was asked to you.
Okay. I think it's quite possible that Mr. Imran Khan will not be present when Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks, though I hope that he will be there. And I don't know if Prime Minister Narendra Modi will sit to listen to Imran Khan. I hope that he sits and listens to Imran Khan, though we know what they are likely to say. Imran Khan is going to speak only about Kashmir, Kashmir and Kashmir, while Prime Minister Modi will speak about the development of India, the environment, and how India's story can act as a template for the rest of the world, especially for the developing countries.
And while all this while, the Indian Prime Minister has steered clear of raking up the Pakistan issue because he has other things on his agenda list. Today, I think it'll be a little difficult, would you say, to avoid that subject?
I think it would be difficult to avoid that subject, but I think Prime Minister Modi has handled the Pakistan scenario remarkably well, in the sense that he has redefined the entire relationship. Think about SAARC and then think about BIMSTEC. Think about the things that he has done to ensure that Pakistan remains a marginalized country in terms of India relationship. And he has never spoken in evil about Pakistan the way Pakistani Prime Minister has been going ballistic. The fact that even he has threatened nuclear holocaust on about a group of people where he thinks or he believes or he wants to be the ambassador of Kashmir. And I think the world leadership must take cognizance of that belligerence. You do not threaten the world with a nuclear holocaust on an international or the domestic issue of a country. And that is something which I think Prime Minister will refer to, and I think he ought to refer to, that how can this august body of United Nations ignore a belligerence of this kind by a neighboring Prime Minister of a country? So theatrical aside, Prime Minister of Pakistan has lost his battle because he has tried to rake up the issue around the international forum. And every country, by the way, every country has some internal issue of their own. So if we all begin to interfere in somebody's internal issue, you are looking at a, pot boiling in a manner that nobody is going to listen to anybody else.
I think, are we overstating Imran Khan? I watched him last night before the Asia Society, and he really tried to step back from, number one, his words that seemed to lead toward war, saying that anybody who would start a war is crazy. Anybody that war is crazy, the decision of war is crazy. He also said in a very calm demeanor that his sole purpose for being here was to get international recognition of what was happening and for the United Nations to do something. Is there any chance that's going to happen?
Pakistan's, what you call it, this stepping back of, you go back to the rhetoric of their ministers and their politicians that we will wage a jihad, that every Pakistani youth ought to be ready to die. These are not small matters. They were not made by ordinary citizens. They were made by the government officials. So for Pakistan to pipe down on this matter is a pure and simple recognition of one big fact, that they can't stand, they can't last a 3 to 7 day of conventional war against India. They have nothing. Their armament is supplied by everybody else. They don't have drinking water for 56% of Punjabis in Punjab, which is the most prosperous state. 50% of these two children in Pakistan don't go to schools, and he has the goal to say that he wants to live and die for Kashmir. How bizarre is that? How unrealistic is that? And that's where the realization comes. You play one step back and two steps forward. So if that is the case, we know that India has begun to recognize that one simple fact is that Pakistan government has become totally anti-India, has always been. I'm not talking about the people of Pakistan. Everybody needs peace. So, but the government's very existence depends on the theological issue of Islam over Hindu. And that's the sad part. If only Pakistan chose to ignore India on its east, leave India alone, focus on your people to develop, provide them with good education, good economy, I think the drama will change there. But no, they have a better know that India has to be beaten in every international forum. That's the only issue they have.
Doctor, is there a possibility that the UN will take any role, and why not have an international role in trying to do something about this situation?
Well, number one, based on the UN Charter, they are not supposed to interfere into the internal affairs of the countries. That is part of the UN Charter. Second thing, when the Security Council took up the issue in 1948, number one condition was that Pakistan shall withdraw all the troops from the area that it is occupying. Pakistan has never done it. If I make a deal, somebody that I'll sell you my house for this much amount of money, you pay the money and I transfer you the title. If you never pay the money and then you come up 72 years later, oh, by the way, we had this little agreement, but I never fulfilled my part of it, and now you are coming to me and telling me that you fulfilled the part of it? No, United Nations is not going to get involved. Why should they get involved? They have no business to get involved. Yes, nobody likes to have peace being disturbed. But where is the peace being disturbed? From Pakistan. It's not just India that is being threatened. Where did Taliban come from? Who trained them? Who recruited them? Who financed them? Did they drop from the moon in Afghanistan? I mean, look at it. Here is a fellow Islamic country. Every week you will have bombing going on and scores of people being killed every week. I mean, thousands of people have died in Afghanistan. Second, talking about the human rights, 400,000 people died in Syria. Where was Pakistan talking about the human rights of the Muslims?
So, or for that matter, in China, for that matter. You know,
there are 1 million Uyghurs, and yesterday, Assistant Secretary of State Alice Wells said, why is Imran Khan not having the same kind of passion for 1 million Muslims in Uyghur, East Turkestan as they call it, who are in concentration camps? And Imran Khan's reply is, oh, we have a special relationship with China and we talk it in private. So I think this is all nonsense that he is doing. Probably he is, as you used to say in old time, his master's voice. The ISI and army are using him as a cheerleader on behalf of whatever evil things that they are doing. I mean, think of it. Who is supplying all these arms to the terrorists most of the part of the world? Pakistan. The only assembly line they have is of the terrorist.
Let me turn this argument a bit, and because we are in New York and the United Nations General Assembly is on. So whenever the question of India and Pakistan comes up, as Ira asked, why shouldn't the UN get involved? Here is the other side of the argument. What can the UN achieve by getting involved? This is a body that has not been able to agree on a definition of terrorism. What can the United Nations do? What has been its success story? So would you agree that this is a subject that's best left to the two parties which are involved there? And what role then do you see for the fact that we raise Kashmir, the fact that we raise Pakistani terrorism? The Indian Prime Minister has asked for a global conference on terrorism the first time he spoke at the United Nations. What constructive role can the UN play in perhaps calling out Pakistan or making people more accountable when they foster terrorism?
You are absolutely right that the United Nations role in India, Pakistan, when the matter was referred to them at the time of independence, the question here is that US, unfortunately, has lost its locus standi on this issue. Because if you could not enforce Pakistan to withdraw its marauders from that occupied territory, how can you expect the next stage to happen? 1, 2, 3, 4 is a sequencing. The sequencing of this entire thing was Pakistan must withdraw its people from in that region. 2 follows 1, 3 follows 2. You can't suddenly say, okay, I'm not doing 2 and 3, but do 1. It doesn't work like that.
And a plebiscite is a vote, and elections have happened in Kashmir.
And Kashmir has been the beneficiary, the Indian part of the Kashmir has been the beneficiary of regular elections. I mean, anybody can verify that fact. Has there been any elections in that part of the other part of the world? We know what a sham democracy it is. So the question here is for United Nations, I think, in the rewritten agenda of United Nations is best left for economic development, because that's the root of the problem. See, none of the Kashmiris who were thrown out of Kashmir, brutalized, murdered, raped and killed, nobody tied a bomb and went to blow up Kashmir area of Islamic areas at all. Not one. But at the beck and call, every Pakistani is ready to blow himself up, and Pakistan was home, as Dr. Barai rightly said, was a home for training the terrorism and training the terrorists, as well as home to on their return. It started in 1992 World Trade bombing. I was here at that time. So it started with that. Osama bin Laden was living right under the nose of the military. To say that we did not know he was hiding there, there can't be a bigger lie than that. And it's time, you talked about accountability, it's time for the United Nations to make Pakistan accountable for its actions. It's remarkably important.
These two countries, I'll get to you in a second, but these two countries have been at odds for how many decades now? All right?
Ever since independence.
Right, exactly. So therefore, what happens, why, we're talking about two nuclear powers here. Why should it not be a world issue?
Well, there are so many countries have nuclear powers, nuclear thing, but who is threatening? India has never threatened Pakistan. India has never threatened any part of the world. But Pakistanis have been threatening. They have one agenda with India, somewhere, somehow or somewhere. See, remember one thing. It is Kashmir, that 15% of the land of that state. By the way, 50% is Ladakh, 25% is Jammu. With this action which Prime Minister took, he re-established the identity and culture of these two regions. Somewhere along the line, the whole state got hijacked by the use of the word Kashmir. That's not true. It's a composite state of three distinct cultural identities, and that the world doesn't know. Where India has failed is to truly and properly educate the world of the challenge and dimension. And Pakistan has enjoyed an amazing, unnecessary, hyphenated relationship with India because of Kashmir. This toy is taken away from their hand now. They have nothing to talk about. They can't take care of their own people in their own country. What are they worried about Kashmiris?
Some of the things that have not been heard so clearly, when the Britishers were ruling India in 1846, Maharaja Gulab Chand purchased the area of Kashmir from the East India Company. Now this kind of purchases have happened. United States purchased Alaska from the Russians. They purchased Louisiana from the French, and they became part of the United States. So when the Britishers gave independence, they gave independence to two shells, Pakistan and India, and 565 princely states. Now, they decided, based on contiguity and the wish of the Maharajas, where they are going to go. And Maharaja of Kashmir initially decided, Hari Singh, that he wanted to still think over because he had considerable Muslim population. So he signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan. Pakistan did not even honor. He was trying to decide whether to go with Pakistan or to go with India or to stay independent. And I suspect this was a trick by the Britishers to keep their colonial rule, because they thought that some of these 565 princely states will choose to have a treaty with Britain. And almost the southern state of Kerala, where Travancore is, that Maharaja almost was thinking that he should try a treaty with Britain so that there will be collaboration. So if every princely state became part of Pakistan or India by the formula that was set up by the British, why the same formula does not apply to Kashmir? But in addition to that, let me point out, which nobody has pointed out so far. Kashmir had a constituent assembly that was elected in 1951, and in 1954, all the 75 members of the constituent assembly unanimously ratified accession with India. So it became a two-step process. So you are talking about plebiscite. How are all the treaties ratified in United States by the United States Senate? Britain, same way, the Parliament. So here, an elected constituent assembly in Kashmir ratified the accession, which was originally signed by Maharaja Hari Singh. So if you say that no, that's not valid, then the whole thing unravels how India and Pakistan became two independent countries.
In addition, the United States as well as UK accepted the instrument of taxation with India. The title to the property is with India.
Yeah.
So regardless of what Pakistan shouts about, they have violated, as Dr. Barai rightly pointed out, they don't adhere to Shimla Accord, they don't adhere to any bilateral agreements, although the entire issue has been agreed upon as Shimla Accord to be settled bilaterally. So they violate. They play the game as it suits their music.
Right, so there's history, there is law, there is, of course, a lot of proof also of Pakistan sponsoring terrorists and sending them into India. Question number one is, do you believe that the Indian Prime Minister will raise the issue of Article 370 when he speaks at the United Nations General Assembly? He did mention it in Houston, but do you believe he will use this platform to once again clarify India's position?
My personal feeling is, and I'm only speaking my opinion because the audience was different in Houston, the audience is a little different here. He might mention that we had some temporary provisions in the Indian Constitution, and it was entirely within India's sovereign right to make any amendments in its Constitution. And by the way, it was not part of the main Constitution. It was in Chapter 21, temporary and transitional provisions. So even it did not belong to the main Constitution. And ultimately, a temporary thing has to end at some point. And I think once they got enough of votes in both houses of parliament, they decided to act.
Do you also believe that given the track record of both sides and given the fact that Pakistan and the leadership, current leadership, still remains intent on sticking to that position, this is going to be an intractable conflict in the foreseeable future?
Well, it has been an intractable conflict, and the point of the matter remains that the whole world ought to know, if it doesn't know, that Pakistan has foisted war on India not once, twice, thrice, but 4 times. And each time they have lost the war, including 1971. So they know that they can't fight a conventional war with India and survive. So who is creating an intractable problem? The question here is very simple, is that when you link yourself on a theological and religious basis to a problem, then it becomes an issue with the rest of it. And Pakistan, India took a stand now, thus far and no further. So there had to be a need for a defined, definitive, and determined action on this issue. You cannot have a temporary thing become permanent just because your enemy is belligerent. India has offered so many times. You are aware of Aman Ki Asha, the second track, as they're famously known, to have peace. But Pakistan has only one agenda: give me Kashmir, and that's it. But that is not the way the government of India can operate. So it is an intractable thing. Yes, it is. But now Pakistan has no locus standi. India has done reorganization of states many times. Several states have gone through. And here, I think the world must recognize this element that for once, by the 370 article, Kashmir has become part of an Indian rule of law. You cannot have a special status at the expense of 70% of the land mass, 75% of the land mass, and you can't compromise it in one way or the other. The world needs to know that.
I think just in the short time we have left, we should probably go toward what Prime Minister Modi might have to say. And me being with VOA, there was expected, I believe, some kind of trade agreement to be announced between the United States and India. And I've heard nothing about that so far. Have either of you?
No. President Trump did say that we shortly expect to announce it, though it has not been announced. I think they are very close to it. Ira, one thing I would like to hear from Prime Minister Imran Khan. What is he going to do for people of Pakistan? Milk is selling for a liter $2.50, 180 rupees. I mean, half the children don't go to the school. By having the factory of terrorists and madrasas, there is no Microsoft there is no Google there are no international companies who want to go to Pakistan because of safety. So instead of worrying about 6 million people of Kashmir that don't belong to him, why does he not worry about the 185 million people in his own country? This is what General Mattis said, that this is one country whose leaders don't love their own people. And if I put it question, and somebody asked me, and I quoted Mrs. Golda Meir, when somebody asked her, when will peace come to Middle East? And she said, when the Arabs start loving their children more than hating the Jews. So when will peace come to India, Pakistan? When Pakistani leaders start taking care of their own people and not mess around in the affairs of other countries.
All right, I'm sorry, we are just totally out of time here. I wish we were not. That's all from Setting the Agenda today.